Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of Pant Plus One. I am very excited about this one because I made a leap of faith to reach out to one of my favorite comedians on the planet, Jim Gaffigan. If you don't know Jim Gaffigan, he has five specials on Netflix and two on Amazon Prime. I don't think there's any comedian in the world who has that much. You may also recognize him from That 70s Show and multiple acting jobs that he's had. We spoke on Zoom, so there may be some delay in conversation. But I'm very excited about this conversation which I had with Jim Gaffigan. I will also explain some of the references that we made, which you may not know about at the end of the video. I may be giggling like a little schoolboy meeting Shah Rukh Khan for the first time because comedians are my original celebrities. So enjoy this and enjoy me going like hee throughout. Here is Jim Gaffigan. Yeah, it's my wife was. I don't know if this is happening in your house. I think it's been barely 2.5 weeks since stand up stopped, and because I'm not getting that outlet on a daily basis, my wife was like, "Can you just do something? You need to go
Oh
out there
yeah.
and put something out because you're really getting agitated about random nonsense." And I'm going off on rants about towels, and she's like, "There's nothing wrong with the towels. You're just missing this thing that
Right.
you're obsessed with."
Yeah, no, I think comedians are we become reliant on the endorphin rush that we get from making strangers laugh. That is you could just say we get off on praise, but I think, obviously quarantine is different for everyone, but I think for comedians that outlet, because prior to this, if I didn't perform like 3 nights, my wife would be like, "Get out, go do a show." And it's kind of like a running joke with me and a friend of mine who's a comedian. Whenever you go on vacation, I'm like, "How long into the vacation did you wish you were just doing stand up?" And he's like, "2 days." You know what I mean? It's like you're in paradise and you're like, "I wish there was a show here I could do."
I had a similar thing. I was doing a show in. I was doing a. I've written like three books. So I was doing a lit fest in Bhutan, which is a beautiful country on the east side of India. And I was there, and I was just enjoying the vacation. And it's one of the most gorgeous places on earth. And I was like, you know what? I got to do an open mic somewhere. And they're like, we don't have that concept. I'm like, let's start. And I started an open mic in Bhutan. That was great. It turned out phenomenal because I was
Yeah.
just surprised by somebody doing this out there. So yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's comedians are so you're forced to be resourceful. And so that's yeah, it's going to be interesting because I do all these press interviews and they're like, "You must be getting tons of material." And I'm like, "But some of the process is being on stage. That helps digest what we're seeing." That's kind of like the being on stage helps kind of emotionally balance us.
It is because I think I did the Melbourne Comedy Festival in 2018, and there was a joke that I'd written which was about China's eating habits, which is relatively relevant right now. But I had done this particular joke in China, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in front of Chinese people, in front of like across the board in Southeast Asia, and each and every time, like Chinese people are like, "Yeah, that was great, it was really funny." I performed it in Australia, and people were I could see a room full of largely white Australians just cringe up like, "Are you
Yeah.
allowed to say that?" And it's interesting where I don't know if you've ever done Hong Kong. So I was doing Hong Kong and I spoke to a bunch of local comedians there. I'm like, "Hey, how come you don't do any jokes about the government?" And they're like, "Because we want to continue doing stand up here." And
Yeah.
I think it leads to a very interesting thing which I've been thinking about for a while, where I'm like, I think this concept of freedom of speech is it's not. I think the only country which may probably have the full right of it is probably the US. Everywhere else there's a version of either somebody getting worked up by something or the other. Like you can't talk about the government in 90% of the places in the world. Do you agree with that at all?
Well, I think, based on traveling internationally and performing internationally, I should say, that there is, and I'm a guy who, I can perform in Thailand or Turkey, or I could perform in the Middle East. I haven't yet, but there's restrictions kind of everywhere. Like, so censorship is this interesting thing because as an American, we associate it with George Carlin's Seven Dirty Words, Lenny Bruce, standing up for, filthy language, the ability to say it. But some of the censorship comes from the government, whether it be in China. In Thailand, you can't make fun of the Thai royal family. In Hong Kong, it doesn't make sense. In Turkey, you can't bring up Erdogan. But the weird thing is that, democracies where you can supposedly talk about everything, culturally, there's restrictions. So in other words, and again, I'm not for any type of censorship. And again, I do what I do, but I have friends that also want to challenge everything. That, in the US, there's cultural restrictions. And you bring up, you performing, talking about what the Chinese eat in Australia, there is that restriction. Do you know what I mean? And it's well intended, but it is a form of censorship. So in other words, I find that it's kind of this misnomer, or it's something that was generally true in the southern part of the United States. You couldn't do religion jokes about Christianity. But the reality is that you can, if they're done from the right perspective. But in the US, whether it be Dave Chappelle or anyone, there are certain hot topics that right now immediately censorship flags go up. And, like you talk about Australia, it's like, because I've done the Melbourne Festival where they literally start every show by saying we're on native land that we stole, right? And again, well intended, but that sets a tone in the room, kind of like, oh, that's right, which is history. You know what I mean? It's colonialism, right? And so I think the idea of, doing international shows really kind of pointed this out. There's censorship everywhere. By the way, liberty, the liberty that exists in the US and that exists in India today would be considered bananas 30 years ago. Like your grandfather and my grandfather, or our great grandparents, would consider the assumed rights of the individual today to be ridiculous. So it's always moving, and I just think that we can get caught up in, some of it is it censorship, or is it kind of social norms, or what's considered polite? And I'm not saying polite is the right way to go, but like, for me, it's like, if you want to make people laugh, like what in Australia now is, if you bring that joke up or you want to do that joke, you either have to disarm them before or disarm them after, right? And so the thing is the shorter the distance to the punchline is the most effective way. So I think that, and I'm like, look, I'm this super white guy, right? So like, going back to like talking about politics, I'm, if I was in, a former British colony, that was under, wildly oppressive English colonialism, I have to take that on, and I have to be aware of that. So it's just, some of it is kind of the science of history, right? It's like, if you're like, I'm a straight guy with 5 kids, it's like, if I'm performing in front of a gay audience, I better address it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, like, let's be realistic here. I either have to prove to them that I'm not homophobic, or I have to, say I'm not. Do you know what I mean? And so it's so fascinating because it's it's changing constantly, right? And there's some great, comedy is educating a lot of people, and it's one of those things where, like, I was just in Colombia. I didn't know that they spelled Colombia different than how we spelled Colombia in, Columbia, British Columbia in Canada. It's, human beings are pretty ignorant. We're still learning. Like, that's why I always get annoyed when people are like, we got to figure it out. This generation's got to figure it out. We don't. We have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah, we're completely clueless. Like every, like, I think even with COVID and stuff like that, I think as a rule, right? I remember the first, I think 2 days prior to the lockdown being announced in India, I remember listening to this TEDx talk by this lady who said, "Hey, this is gonna be a while." I'm like, "Shut up! Don't tell me. I know better than you. This is gonna be over in a week."
Yeah.
And we learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you
Yeah.
dealing with the lockdown? How are you keeping yourself?
My wife is high risk, so we're on kind of like double secret lockdown. And, I think about like 9/11 when that happened. I was in my, you know, I think I was 30. So um it was something that it depends where you are in your life. So like being married and having children, I have a different approach to it than someone who doesn't have children or isn't married. I can't really kind of be as adventurous as I would be in my 20s. That's not to say that I wouldn't observe the lockdown, but I'm just saying that there's a vigilance that I have to observe because my wife has lungs that have been compromised. But I would say, I don't know, it's a forced hiatus, right? That's what this is for us comedians. And um, am I being productive? I don't know. Probably not. You know, uh, did I, am I spending a lot of time with my kids? Yeah. Am I, arguing with my wife? Yeah. It's all good and bad, and hopefully, a big thing for us is we do this dinner with the Gaffigans, and we try
Yeah.
and raise money for to get meals to healthcare workers, people on the front line here.
Yeah, I enjoy that. It was fun to watch. I mean, I'm sure all your viewers will agree to this. It's always fun to watch comedians being insulted by their own children.
Oh yeah, it's just
It's great.
nonstop.
All right, that was my conversation with Jim Gaffigan. I don't know why I was mentioning performing in Melbourne for no reason. I got nervous and I'm like, I was in Melbourne. Okay, do you know I went to Melbourne? Please like me. Anyway, head over to Jim Gaffigan's YouTube page, check out all his stuff. Follow him on Instagram. He keeps putting up stand-up clips on a regular basis, which are really super fun and actually very funny. So follow him everywhere. His YouTube channel link is going to be in the description as well. Go there, and I am also going to try, for your entertainment, to try and get a lot of global comedians on this podcast. I am so grateful to him that he came, and hopefully now I will mention on my resume that I have two global comedians, Jim Gaffigan and Veer Das. Ghar ka wala. So thanks a lot to him. Check his stuff out. Keep watching this stuff and subscribe to my channel, dosto.